Greetings. This is your ASAP Track 3 Chair. I am Cindy Cisneros Tiangco, Principal Energy Specialist, Pacific Department. ASAP's Thematic Track 3 on cross-sectoral applications for an inclusive energy transition strings together key strategies under ADB's Energy Policy 2021 to achieve ADB's vision of a prosperous, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable Asia and the Pacific. It has often been said that the battle against climate change will be won and lost in the region, and we are running out of time. A clean energy transition unlocks the cross-sectoral benefits of clean energy and advances progress towards achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Clean energy systems can deliver basic needs, support growing economies, and improve the socio-economic condition of many disadvantaged communities. These systems are also critical for climate mitigation and adaptation, as they enhance the resilience of vulnerable nations and communities. The increase in demand of these systems will support clean energy SMEs and will increasingly open opportunities in high-value green jobs, especially for women. However, the large-scale deployment and scale-up of clean energy technologies and systems continues to be challenging, and innovative business models and financing will be needed. We have lined up 3 sessions to tackle the track theme head-on. This first session will explore innovative technologies and business models for electricity access. Tomorrow, session 3.2 will discuss green jobs, gender, and development. And on Thursday, speakers will highlight cross-sectoral applications of renewable energy systems. The track promises thought-provoking ideas. We hope this will spur not only engaging discussions, but also urgent collective action to deploy these systems at scale. Let me now hand you over to our session moderator, Ms. Emma Veve, Deputy Director General, Pacific Department of Asian Development Bank. Over to you, Emma.
Thanks so much, Cindy, and thank you for your welcome to everyone this afternoon. Let me reiterate what you said. It's great to have everyone with us, and a good afternoon from Manila. We have ahead of us what I hope will be a really interesting, quite invigorating and indeed thought-provoking session looking at innovative technologies and business models for electricity access. Just to outline how the afternoon will work for you, we've got 4 presenters. First up, I'll just name them now, but I'll give you a bit more information on each of them before they talk. We have Charlie Aiko, who is president of WeGen Laudato, Mark Naupo, who is president of Solar Hope, Bagus Mugiantoro, who is policy coordinator at Castle Rock Consulting, and Anna Amazo, who is managing consultant at Guidehouse. Each of them will be talking about slightly different angles of either business systems or innovative technologies that they are using to provide that last mile access to energy. We'll then go into a bit of a panel discussion to focus on some of the interesting themes that are coming out of all of these presentations. And for that, we'll be joined by Young-Sung Kim, who is a research fellow with the Green Energy Strategy Institute in South Korea. And finally, my colleague Mukto Kudmantoharov will close the session with some final words and summing up. So turning to our topic now, let me first introduce Charlie Aiko, who's president of WeGen Laudato. Charlie's had a really interesting and varied career, moving from a teaching job at Ateneo University Manila into politics to become a mayor. He then moved across into the NGO sector. So all very focused on people and learning and ensuring services reach people. He spent many years with Habitat for Humanity Asia Pacific and was eventually appointed the CEO of Habitat for Humanity here in the Philippines in 2011. He then moved across into the energy sector, where he remains today in 2017, joining WeGen Energy Philippines, where he developed key partnerships with critical agencies such as churches, business and local government units to help in their shift to renewable energy. And in 2021, he was appointed the president of WeGen. And this afternoon, he's going to talk to you about the Light in Pamilican project, which has support from Department of Energy, UNDP and GEF, bringing light to the people. So please, Charlie, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Emma, and good afternoon. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share with you our Kahayag sa Pamilakan, or in English, Light in Pamilakan project. It is our belief that this project could be a model for an inclusive energy transition. Pamilakan is a beautiful island in Bohol with over 15,000 residents. It is located in central Philippines. The name of the island comes from the local word pamilak, or to use a harpoon, a device that was historically used to capture manta rays, dolphins, whales, which are abundant near the island. Using the same skills to hunt, the people shifted to tourism-oriented dolphin and whale watching for tourists. They now protect the manta rays, dolphins, and whales instead of hunting them for food. With white sandy beaches, wonderful dive spots, and dolphins and whales playing nearby, the island is a paradise, except that it had no electricity. Until 2017, they used to have electricity only at night when a diesel generator was set up by the local electric cooperative in 1996. The island is too far and isolated to be connected to the power grid supplying electricity to the province's main island of Bohol. So for most of their lives, the residents of Pamilakan did not have access to daytime electricity, and it is very painful because they can see during the evening the bright lights of Panglao Island, which is the main tourist destination in our province. Students could not use computers, teachers could not supplement their classes with video presentations, no electric fans in a very humid place, and fishermen had no way to catch, no way to refrigerate their daily catch. Households could not store food overnight, and spoilage was always plentiful. The Kahayag sa Pamilakan project was started by Regen as a donation. It is a 39 kilowatt peak hybrid solar PV system, and we included 154 kilowatt battery storage. But since the depth of discharge is only 50%, so we can only use 77 kilowatt hours per day. The system was determined based on the survey of the family power need at the time. It was just a little over 100 kilowatts each. The solar panels were mounted on the rooftop of the Pamilakan High School building, which was retrofitted to carry the weight of the solar panels. The power room was constructed near the school where the inverters and batteries were stored, and electricity produced was fed into the existing distribution lines of the local utility. The solar PV system provided the daytime electricity needs of the island, while the diesel generators powered the island during the night. As a result, the island got 24/7 electricity since 2017. For our company, and why we started this, the Pamilakan Solar Energy System is a perfect showcase of our vision, which is the power of sharing, and our vision to make sustainable energy available anytime, anywhere, and for everyone. The immediate impact of the project, which we evaluated after 2 years, we were able to document how the island was able to grow, and living conditions of the residents improved because they had additional means of livelihood. Among the immediate impact of the project were the following: of course, a 24/7 power supply of daytime solar and nighttime diesel, improved livelihood, more tourists, and then storage for the fish catch during the day. There was the growth in the potential of tourism in the island, and improvement in the educational facilities. For the first time, the students were able to use the computers, and they had Wi-Fi connection in their schools. Before that, they could only see pictures of computers and no idea. They have never tried the internet except when they go to the island. And we were also able to train those guys wearing green. They were fishermen, and they volunteered to install the solar panels. So we thought, okay, if you volunteer, we might as well train you. And later on, we employed them as our solar PV installers in various places in the country under the supervision, of course, of trained engineers. So for them, it was an opportunity that there is a chance that they can change also their livelihood. The solar project also served as a catalyst for the community. We organized the Pamilakan Solar Credit Cooperative, which was composed of all women, and this was the cooperative which essentially took ownership of the solar PV system. They collected the electricity bills from the community, and then they set aside a portion of their collection to be used as a livelihood for their organization. And they hired the technical staff who would manage the system. For the public school teachers, it provided them with an opportunity to have experience-based teaching on renewable energy. Before that, all that they could do was show pictures. So it didn't occur to us. It was only when we inaugurated the system, and then after testing that, the teachers came to us and said, you know what, it is much, much easier for us now to teach our students about climate change and about renewable energy, because they can see it, they can feel it, they can touch it. No, it's no longer theoretical for them. And of course, for the young ones, charging the cell phone is very important in the evening. But there was a clamour for more. This is the challenge of success, because people began to buy refrigerators, freezers. So the need for additional energy had to be met, and they asked us. And we told the community, we're very sorry, we cannot give you another grant. We are a for-profit corporation. And so what we did was we helped them look for donors, and we were able to find this program under the Department of Energy called the DREAMS Project, where our partners was the Department of Energy of the Philippines, which provided the grant funds, I think also from GEF, and then Region Laudato Si. We are the proponent. We had to write all the proposal because the community didn't know how to do that. And even it was a joint proposal with the local electric cooperative. But the local electric cooperative did not have any experience on designing a solar PV system. So they were very dependent on us. They knew how to run a traditional electric system because they are a local distributor. But designing and running a solar, even if this is only a small, we increase it up to 80 kilowatts. For them, they didn't have the experience. So we have to teach them how to do that. And then finally, they agreed to do the operations and maintenance. We needed a roof. And fortunately, the Department of Education agreed to allow us to use the roof of the school. And I mentioned already the Pamilacan Solar Credit Cooperative. They were the beneficiaries, and they assisted in the installation. You can see those people. They were the ones who organized, because there's only a very small load. And I didn't have the picture there. One of the heaviest component was the inverter, which is like 1 ton, and the people had to carry that. So they have to carry all the solar panels going to the public schools, and we call it bayanihan, that is helping together as a community. And we also involved the local government, we call it barangay in the Philippines, to secure the facilities because we cannot afford to hire security guards, and also to look for possibilities for them to maintain the system, especially if there's some damage on the school. Now, what is very important is the business model, and this is where I think we can replicate. You can just replace our role as the donor and replace that with, let us say, a loan, because the people are collecting payments for their electricity expenses. So if you replace the donation into an investment, you can replicate as long as you engage the local electric cooperative or the distribution utility, because they own the distribution system. And then the participation of the community is very, very important, because they are the ones maintaining and collecting the payment. So, and we set around the community trust fund. So we do not promote the replication of the donation model, but we think that the model can work even if there is no donation. So to summarize, business model is very important, stakeholder participation is very important, knowledge of the technology which we provided is important, and we hope that this model could be replicable to other areas. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Charlie, for that very interesting presentation. Audience, if you have questions, please jot them down, and we can take some questions later. Up next, we have Mark Nalpo, who, as I said, is president of Solar Hope. Reading his CV, you can see his passion for bringing light to houses and families, particularly the poorer and more distant of them. He is president, as I said, of and founder of Solar Hope, which is an NGO that aims to provide solar and sustainable solutions to marginalized communities in the Philippines. He does have a day job to keep this NGO going, where he works as a transmission line and substations project lead specialist. So that shows real dedication to the cause, I think. His NGO work has been going for more than 9 years now, and he states his life mission is to give hope and light to the lives and houses of people. So Mark, I hand over to you, very interested to hear you share your story with us. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning. Could you hear me? Is it clear?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, good morning again. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm Mark Napao, President and Founder of Solar Hope, and I'm here to share our journey and our story in the communities. So I'm going to talk about sustainable community development and how important renewable energy and also joint community initiatives in developing these communities. So let me start by asking a simple question. Have you ever wondered what if you wake up one morning and you could never use electricity ever again for the rest of your life? Could you live without lights at night, cell phone, or do your work without computer? Well, sadly for some, it's not just an imagination. It is their reality. Here in our country, there are still millions of households and thousands of sitios or small communities without access to energy. And most of them belong to the rural areas or islands, just as presented earlier, and also belong to the poorest of the poor. So definitely our country really needs hope and light. And hence, that's why we started. Solar Hope is an NGO that provides solar and sustainable solutions to these kinds of communities. So this is our approach. First is community engagement and mapping. We work closely with community locals, community champions, and local community organizations, and then identify which households really need access to energy. And then together with them, we build a project, and then together with them again, we install it in the communities. And then after 6 months and a year, we go back and check how are the systems working. So this is our general approach, but later I'll also share how we also evolve from this. So these are the communities that we have worked. It's mostly mountainous communities, an island, and sometimes it takes us to ride a boat. But most of these are IP communities or indigenous people. It was in 2019 where we had our first solar project. We call our solar projects Tanglao or Light in English. And our first solar project, we just provided solar lanterns in a mountain community. And this is very memorable because the communities really cried because this was the first time that they saw how bright their community is. So this was our first Tanglao project. And then in 2020, in the height of the pandemic, the mission continues. And then we provided this time solar home systems, fixed systems in their homes. So this is very helpful, especially for the families that to cope with the pandemic because they were forced to stay at home during lockdowns. And most especially in their children, because here in the Philippines, the education transitioned into modular, meaning they're bringing home their school activities. And for these communities, some of them are just using car batteries, kerosene lamps for their lighting. So with solar, it really helped their children for their education. And then it continued last year, this time in bringing light to more communities, even crossing to an island. And we worked closely with the community leaders and brought all the solar home systems by boat to the community. And it was really a memorable experience because there's really a challenge in securing permits, how to bring it, the logistics, but still it became successful because of the community and the partners. And last year, up to now, the Tanglao project is going, and we're targeting now to light more than 1,000 homes. And this is our impact so far. So we've reached 32 communities, lighted 2,000 homes, and beacons of hope. So just to share some of the Tanglao stories or success stories in the communities we're working with. For example, for the Herones family, before they were spending 0.2 cents US dollars per day for a kerosene lamp, but now with solar, it's free, and it was turned to savings. And he also shared to us that before they were just enduring the dark when they don't have kerosene lamps anymore. But now even it's night, you're still able to enjoy the light. Another story here is from Lola, a senior from another community. And he's been in the community for more than 70 or 80 years. And this was the first time that the community really lit. And it's really a big help for them because they're just used to using car batteries and kerosene lamps as well for lighting. So these are just some of the stories, but let me share more about community benefits in the Tanglao stories. This is one community that we're helping in Mindoro, an island community. In this one, we work with a community organization who's been there for more than 20 years. And as you can see in the picture, it's not only solar or energy that was able to help, but together with the community and the partners, more developments were made, like a rice mill for their livelihood, multi-purpose hall for gatherings and storage of their medicines. And it's really, the solar project is like just one of the community projects in the community. And it's really amazing how the locals were very receptive and supportive in doing the projects in the community. So what we experience in Mindoro, we're trying to replicate in other communities we're helping. Like for example, here in Santa Ines, in a mountain community, wherein we need to traverse 7 rivers just to go to the community. And this time, what we're working closely with the local school, and not only the school were helped, but also the households in the community. We, together with more partners helping with us in this community, were able to put solar in the school that we're now using for their facilities, each household, and then more livelihood and education assistance for the community. So basically, that's how we're working. It's like really a joint community projects in all our communities, not just energy access. So these are just some pictures of the communities we're working with. Our volunteers are ranging from students to young professionals and even others who are retiring. So let me end by sharing why I started Solar Hope in the first place. So many people are saying that what we're doing is amazing, inspiring, and good. But actually, Solar Hope is a fruit of my depression. So I was actually in the verge of losing hope, but everything changed when I joined an outreach in a community in Batangas. During the immersion, I saw that there's still something I could do. And being an electrical engineer, I noticed their need for energy. So that's how it started, a passion project, and it grew to what I have been sharing to you now. So this has been my life mission, to give hope and light to the lives and houses of the Filipino people. And this has been a challenge for everyone. Together, let us become beacons of hope. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mark. That's wonderful to hear about your story and to get just a little glimpse of life for the Filipino people in the most remote parts of the country. Wonderful to hear about it. We'll turn now and we'll hear next from Bagus Mudian Toro, who is the policy co-director for UK Indonesia Mentari program and also managing consultant at Castle Rock Consulting. He brings over 20 years of experience in project management and more than 12 years in the energy sector. He's a management advisor for energy and infrastructure project development, primarily in electricity and urban areas. And he has expertise relating to climate change, the energy sector, and sustainable infrastructure development. And so please, Bagus, hand over to you now. Very interested to hear your story. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you very much for Charlie and John. This very fascinating presentation as well as about the way that you deliver the project. So without further ado, I'm a co-director for Mentari for the policy. So actually the Mentari is toward low carbon and energy transition in Indonesia as a G2G program between the British Embassy Jakarta and also the government of Indonesia with the 4 strands. First is about the policy, is deliver the how to improve the policy in Indonesia, brokerage, how to doing the matchmaking for make it tangible project, and then demonstration is try to support the government to deliver the pilot project from the demonstration perspective. And lastly is about the collaboration and networking, because we see that our new era is about how to do the collaboration. So basically, we are thinking about the off-grid, but definition of the off-grid is not only in Indonesia. If I learn from the body of literature, is about there is a very massive debate on the off-grid definition. However, let we discuss in here is off-grid definition in this study is about as a distributed approach or solution to provide reliable electricity supply to the demand area without needing to connect to the utility grid, or what we call PLN in Indonesia with the 20 kV or above, or any similar grid for the next 5 years, since the utility company considered them as a kind of the marginal area. So as we learned from John and also learned from Charlie, there is a lot of area without electricity, since the utility company seeing that this area is quite marginal, it's not profitable to them. So we try to identify the program, learning from the existing implementation. It's not only in Indonesia, but also focus on the Indonesia, because we try to understand further about what happened in the off-grid program in Indonesia. So the off-grid studies are identified 10 business model. That's kind of the current practice in the country. So we are trying to see from the institutional perspective and institutional and capability and process. And we also seeing vividly and assess about the subsidy and viability subsidy, and also possibly to have a kind of alternative financing for the subsidy. The fourth one is we try to see vividly about the technical perspective. Subsequently, we check about the economical perspective from the sustainability, and we see we assess about the financial, and lastly we assess about the social. From the study, we see we can classify the current practice into three modality. First is about any program using the grant or using the private company investment within the utility company area. What we call this in Indonesia, we call it PLN basis area. So the permit must be obtained by any party under license through the PLN or through the utility company. Second is about the out of the utility company. So the organization or institution or unit to deliver the grant must grant the permit from the regulator. And lastly is about the permit license by franchisee systems. Is kind of the alternative or innovative modality through the collaboration between regulator and the utility company. From the utility company in here, I put there is 10 activities, what we call the first micro IPP, whereas the community will deliver the generation at the marginal area while the utility company will develop the grid. Second is if the company is using rental or the existing facility will be ran by the utility company. The third one is about the collaboration, what we call KSO. KSO is kind of a joint operation, so it's kind of the modality that we can do from the existing asset. Using the operation will be developed or will be monitored by the utility company. And the fourth one is trying to develop the offer what we call the PLU in Indonesia. PLU is kind of the operating for the public service obligation, and then the government will deliver a contractor to do that. And the community base, like John and also Michael already presented, is kind of based on the NGO or the cooperation, but it's based on the community base. And subsequently, we have a kind of what we call the BUMDES, is kind of the village enterprises owned by the local authority in the village level. And the BUMD is a local authority, what we call the local government enterprises. The eighth is about the partnership between SOE, state-owned enterprise, with the local government enterprises. The ninth is about what we KPBU Indonesia is a PPP project. Lastly is a fully private project. After we assess all of these things, this is the jointly operation cooperation, what we call KSO program. Basically, it's a kind of the operate the existing asset and then collaborate with the utility company, as also mentioned by Michael. Utility company has the ability to operate while they have a limited understanding about the new technology from if we discuss about the small island and remote area. But the most prominent issue in here is a change of the perspective of the players, of stakeholders. So under the grant basis, we can get a recipient, and the recipient develop the asset, and then while the asset will be operated after 2 years, then collaboration between the utility company can be very beneficial to ensure the sustainability while the asset will deliver. The asset will deliver the what we call the electricity. Here, the asset will deliver the electricity to the customer, and then the payment will be offered to the utility company, and then PLN will pay the recipient to ensure the sustainability of the asset. We also see and then assess the possibility to have a proposed extended version. The proposed extended version is also mentioned by Michael as well. Is about we can do this one not only offer the grant basis, but we already offer the private entity, maybe using the CSR or using the angel investors or using the what we call blended financing. Then the eligible entity can develop using the EPC to build the asset and then deliver the operation together with the utility company. The the most probable model or business model is about engaging with the local government enterprises, or we call it PUMD, and the village authority enterprises, what we call BUMDES partnership. Under this partnership, there is a kind of very specific beneficial to have a kind of the involvement of the local government using their entity. The local government commit to develop the off-grid. Otherwise, the local government will only wait any facilities from the national government. Under this activity, the payment will be based on the state budget over their equity share to the PUMD or BUMDES. So they will develop SPV, and then using what we call WILUS is a business entity or business specific area. Then they can deliver together with the PLN. So lastly is about the third one is about micro IPP, as I mentioned earlier. So this is kind of the specific collaboration develop the generation side. If we go to the funding of viability gap funds, we can get from the PSO perspective or public service obligation perspective, what we call subsidy. Usually subsidy in Indonesia is kind of the regulated price, and then the gap from the COGS or operation cost going to be covered by the government. But now we try to kind of offer the bidding price. So if there is a company A, company B, and company C deliver the off-grid model, then we can try to calculate the gap for the lowest subsidy that will cover by the government. It's we assess from the economic perspective, it is going to be very beneficial and applicable to the country. If we see the barriers of the off-grid market, there is several barriers. First is about the fragmented legal framework in Indonesia, not only Indonesia. If I learn from the Philippines, Vietnam is also similar. The second is the gap of national rural electrification planning. The third is cognitive behavior of the utility. The fourth is the funding gap to electricity program. The government clear direction is a must. Then market accepted tariff, so off-grid is also potential to attract the investment. Last is what advanced financing scheme for off-grid is prominent to support the off-grid. The takeaway point from our assessment in Indonesia using a case study, we need to have a kind of the energy regulatory and legal framework for off-grid, which necessary national electricity policy and planning for off-grid. Robust one. Second is a transparent data electricity from the utility company, and utility company can avoid the myopic syndrome and also cognitive behavior. The third is about the cost-based tariff on off-grid with the possible support of a government of subsidy. Competitive tender for subsidy is essential. The fifth one is specific regulation for the new business model, particularly from the joint cooperation is a must, and microgrid is also required. The collaboration with the local government and the village level authority to take incentive for establishing trade collaboration of off-grid is very beneficial because it's kind of provide the specific motivation for the local government. Last but not least, collaborative effort from interministerial for enabling three business model is very, very effective. So it's not only DOE or Department of Energy, but since there is a subsidy, Department of Finance is a must, and then also the planning agency or planning board from the national level is also very essential. Yeah, we learned a lot, and I'm happy to discuss further with you guys. Thank you. Back to you, Emma.
Thank you, Burgos, for that. Really interesting, and a number of different models that can be fitted to quite different circumstances. So very interesting to hear from you on that. Finally, we'll turn to our last panelist, Anna Amazo, who is managing consultant at Guidehouse, where she's been since around about 2016. In this role at Guidehouse, she supports governments in the design, implementation and evaluation of renewable energy auctions in countries as diverse as Southeast Asia, Africa and Europe. So Anna, turn over to you to learn about auctioning for renewable energy. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Emma. My name is Anna Amazo, and today I would like to share some examples on how to adapt renewable energy auctions to support an inclusive energy transition. I am a managing consultant at Guidehouse and member of USAID's Scaling Up Renewable Energy, also known as SHORE. In the SHORE project, we support partner countries in accelerating the clean energy transition by providing advice on renewable energy planning, the circular economy, as well as grid integration. On this map, I want to briefly show you some of USAID's work supporting auctions, and you can see it spans from Mexico and Colombia to Sub-Saharan Africa, and in Asia, we supported, for example, the design of auctions in India and the Philippines. While we have been talking so far about off-grid applications, I wanted to take you with me on a quick detour on utility scale applications that nonetheless have a relevance in the debate of ensuring an inclusive energy transition. And that's why I'll start by, first making sure we all are on board on what an auction is, and then jumping into concrete examples on how to adapt this design, as well as the broader policy framework to support this goal of an inclusive energy transition. In general, an auction is a competitive process that policymakers can use to purchase new renewable generation, such as solar and wind. Throughout this presentation, I may use the term auction, tender, and competitive procurement as a synonym. But how does an auction work? Let's take a look at the bottom of the graph. In the first step, the government defines how much it wants to procure. Let's say, for example, 100 megawatts of wind. This is the demand of the auction. Project developers then submit their bids, and for example, this can total 150 megawatts of wind capacity. This total will represent the auction supply. These bids or projects are evaluated against participation criteria, and we'll go into detail into those in a bit. And those qualified bids are ranked from lowest to highest price. The auctioneer then awards a contract or a power purchase agreement or PPA to bids or projects that submit the lowest bids up to the point where the auction supply meets the auction demand, which is marked in the graph by the red vertical line. What can auctions do good? They have been able to capture renewable cost decreases and steer up the scale of renewable energy capacities needed to achieve targets, among them ensuring cheap renewable electricity to consumers. However, when auctions focus purely on price, they are not very good at addressing social impacts or ensuring that they are understood, communities are consulted, or that there is some form of benefit sharing or local value creation. But auctions can also be a flexible tool that can be adapted to support an inclusive energy transition, and I'll give you a few examples. In general, auction design can help mitigate adverse impacts, but also enhance beneficial impacts of awarded renewable projects. And we'll take a look at how this can be done. In the graph, you see different types of design elements, such as conditions for participation, penalties that can back contract performance conditions, quotas or bonuses for projects with desirable social impact attributes, and different bid award criteria. Let's walk through them each by each. Conditions for participation typically refer to requirements that project developers need to meet to qualify for the auction. And several countries use environmental and social impact assessments, either a preliminary form thereof as a requirement for participation, but maybe for riskier projects, a full environmental and social impact assessment, as well as proof of community engagement before participating. We see that in Mexico, for example, an NGO backed by USA made a series of recommendations on making sure that the social impact assessment was a requirement for participation. And in Australia, concretely in the state of Victoria, the developers need to present evidence of a community engagement prior to participating in the auction. Other types of conditions for participation include commitments to local value creation, for example, in the form of jobs, or commitment to forms of benefit sharing or social inclusion. In Namibia, for example, the requirement for a PV system was to have 30% ownership for businesses owned by women, or individuals with disabilities. In the Turkey's wind auctions, there's a requirement that I believe 70% of the engineers used in the construction of the project are sourced locally, so from Turkey. And then we see in Ireland and in El Salvador that developers need to ensure that a percentage of their revenue from electricity sales to the utility goes to the local community, either through the creation of a community fund or through the choice of the community. That depends on the country. Another way the auction design can be adapted is by defining quotas. And a quota is a portion of the volume of the auction. So let's say of this 100 megawatts that the government wants to contract, it may define maybe 30 megawatts of those for projects that, as in the case of India and Asia, have a smaller size than 5 megawatts or are reserved for projects with community energy participation. A bonus in this case is, for example, then paid to those projects that show that in their financing, either entire project finance or in their equity portion, have local financial participation. Other ways in which the auction design can be adapted relate to, well, one of them is penalties. And we see that in South Africa, for example, the power purchase agreement, the PPA, defines what they call termination points for, let's say, performance points that are deducted if the project developer during operation is not meeting its economic development obligations. And let me jump into that as to what is an economic development obligation. In South Africa, and now we switch to the bid award criteria. Typically, as I've said, auctions have focused on awarding qualified bids based on price only, that is, those with the lowest price. South Africa opted to define a 70-30 ratio for their award scoring, meaning 70% for lowest price, 30% for projects highly performing on economic development criteria. And ED, or economic development, includes commitments to local job creation, local ownership, and social inclusion as examples. A similar example is also implemented in Malaysia, where, for example, the solar projects that use land for example, agricultural purposes, in addition to having the solar plant, receive merit points, so they have a higher chance of being awarded in the auction. And I think in here it's important to note that while these countries have opted to implement this multi-criteria approaches, and it has worked well in the case of South Africa. There have been some complications, but it's also important to note that achieving this social desired social impacts can also be done with price-only auctions if you define them through, for example, conditions for participation. So through these commitments to local value creation or benefit sharing. We talked about the auction design so far, and sure, it is a flexible tool to ensure that an inclusive transition is supported, but this topic really goes beyond auction design and does require a supportive policy framework. Key things in this regard are, for example, having social impact regulation in place, because this sends clear signals to project developers on what is the scope expected for community engagement and assessments. And this is, for example, was done in Mexico, where they recommended that site visits were a requirement and the generation license was conditional on the social impact evaluation being kept throughout the project. And we also see that policy framework can help developers meet this inclusive transition objectives. In Colombia, there is a multi-sector initiative, for example, where the government leads the program that does all sorts of things, including leading the consultation with the communities, but also devising a capacity building plan that actually helps ensure that the local communities are involved in the construction of these wind projects. And in Chile and Australia, the governments have developed best practice guides on participatory and community engagement processes for the private sector. This was a lot of content to cover in this little amount of time, but I wanted to leave you with this summary of measures that I'm happy to also maybe dive into in more detail in the Q&A later. But for now, I'd like to thank you for your attention, and I look forward to the panel. Back to you, Emma.
Thanks so much, Anna, and thank you for the cheat sheet at the end to remind us of the summary of the auction design and policy measures. Very helpful indeed. Really enjoyed your presentation. So now let's turn to our panel discussion. We have, as I mentioned earlier, an additional panelist who didn't present joining us in that, and that is Yun-Sung Kim, who's the research fellow at Green Energy Strategy Institute in Korea. And as she hasn't had a chance to speak yet, I thought it would be really interesting to ask her, because she's got a particular interest in working with citizens' micro investments and how to bring citizens into this transition to renewable energy. So Yun-Sung, I'd really like to hear from you just how that's going in Korea. I understand there was some initial pushback from citizens in thinking about renewable energy. How are you helping to change people's minds about renewable energy and really get the community involved in it? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for asking. Yeah, the level of the resident acceptance is very low in Korea, and it is still challenging to overcome it. There are pushbacks from farmers and fishermen, especially. I'm thinking about why. One reason about the procedure issues, like Anna said, the right to engage in the development process is very important. And the second reason is about distributional issues, the benefit sharing schemes like that. And so until now, the developers in Korea don't need to have an explanation event before the environmental impact assessment process. So it's too late because, in this time, all the important decisions are done, like siting and the capacity amount. These are done. So from the last year, the government of Korea is trying to organize a committee at the sites with the stakeholders and expertise, and to engage in the project at the proper time. And to mitigate the distributional issues, we have an investment scheme like a shared ownership. And to add some details, we have another schemes. Citizens can buy the bond of the project or buy the fund of the project for the specific project. So when the level of the the resident investment is higher than enough, the government can add some payoff to the resident investors. So I think we can decrease the pushback by this, but as the other presenters said, I'm perfectly agree with that, because the procedure issue is very important, so we need to be legitimated it. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Yung Sung. I think that's a really important point. The end user has to be thought of as sort of an individual person with preferences and needs and desires, and not just seen as someone to whom a service is supplied and they take it or leave it. They like to have some control in that process. Charlie, if I may turn to you, the community you're working with seems very engaged. I would just like to know a little bit about how you encouraged and developed and built the capacity so that the community could be so involved in your work. Thank you.
Well, in the first place, they felt the need. So they were looking for solutions for their need. So when we came in and we said, we can only implement this if you participate. And so they responded positively. Now, so we were able to organize them. Now, we have to understand that the model, while initially it was a grant, we asked them to pay for the electricity that they consume, because that's the only way that they can sustain. They were already paying for the evening consumption from the diesel plant, but this time it means they would pay more. But with that exercise, since it was not really an investment, we made an agreement that a part of their of the payment for electricity will go to a community trust fund, which they are going to utilize for livelihood, health projects, etc. But not everything is perfect, because once there was considerable amount of money already in the trust fund, so conflict begins. There are some people who would like to take over the management of the community association, which I think is normal for any organization. We always, it will not be perfect. We always encourage this. So what we do is some of these people, they would go to us and ask us to for the solution. So we told them, we cannot make decisions for you. What we can do is facilitate so that you can respond to this. And more, we were bringing the local utility to be the active proponent. We went there just to catalyze the whole thing. And even in the expansion, we did not give it to the community. The donation was given to the electric cooperative. And the electric cooperative, in their goodness also, they said that, okay, as our counterpart, we will only charge from the community the cost of operations and maintenance. We will not charge them the recovery of the investment, since it was a grant. But again, as I've said at the end of my presentation, the whole purpose here is, what if there was no grant? Can there be a project? And I would say that since the people were willing to pay and we determined the amount, as long as the key stakeholders there, we could be replaced, or we could replace it with a real investment, and then the project can still go on. I think that's the main point.
Thanks, Charlie. I think that's a very valid point. That you managed to develop in the community has a real appreciation of just what they can do if they have sufficient energy, and are absolutely willing to pay for that, and might discover that it's far cheaper than the sources of energy they had before that were somewhat less satisfactory, perhaps, to give them the use options now. Mark, you're also dealing with, sort of some of the poorer groups within communities. How do you go about selecting who's best placed to for you to work with, and what particular attributes are you looking for in those communities so that they can make the best use of what you can offer them?
Yeah, before we select a community, we go ocular visits and mapping, and we identified a community champion or a local organization that we could work with. And once we go on the mapping, we identify which households are just using kerosene lamps or batteries, and we do surveys. And then from there, we also tag the households on what location in the community using GPS. So we know when we gather all those data, together with the community champion or the host partner, we plan for a project that together with them we could implement. And then, yeah, that's how we choose the beneficiaries.
Thanks for that, Mark. Anna, I'm wondering from the sort of the other side of trying to bring in people to provide renewable energy supply, how has the response of those involved, the companies involved, been to the use of these more social benefits within the sort of the auction process? Did you get any pushback? Was there interest? Has it changed the kinds of companies involved?
I think I can agree with what Charlie was saying before, in the sense that it is also in the interest of the company. So a lot of times companies see the inclusion of social benefits into the projects as a way to also ensure proper project due diligence, as well as facilitate bankability, even attract some funding from developing finance institutions. So from the companies, I believe that there is some openness. Obviously, it's not a generalizable rule, but just an observation. I think what is key, though, is when the rules of the game, in this case, the auction design, does not clearly establish what is it that will be evaluated into the projects. Because if all the projects are going to be judged on the same basis, then all of the developers have the same incentive to invest the time and resources and engage with the community in order to secure those contracts.
Thanks, Anna. Yes, I agree that absolutely making sure the rules of the game are well known up front will be essential to attract firms who are willing to participate in the process. Bagus, wondering what you've seen in trying to use the various business models that you spoke about to attract the private sector to some of the more remote rural locations in Indonesia. What has been the uptake and the interests of private firms, and are they different perhaps than some who are more interested in urban supplies?
So thank you very much, Emma. So it's very interesting question. So it's very challenging as well. Anyway, actually there is a market on the off-grid, and then there is an interest from the private sectors, particularly using the ESG approach, and then they have to comply with the ESG if they can do the kind of the renewable energy supply using the solar into the off-grid program. It is already proven in several areas using several projects, not only from the government perspective, but also kind of the MCA and the USAID funding as well, and another funding as well. So actually, the private sector is eager to do, as long as there is a kind of clear horizon from the local from the national government about off-grid. Second is about the openness of the current utility company, because in Indonesia it's only single system with the one of a big monolith utility company. If there is a kind of the clear horizon and clear position or perspective from the utility company, then the opportunity is wide open, and private sector will jump into this electricity in off-grid. I do believe that with the three business models, the first business model trying to maintain the existing asset over the grant program, like a lot of programs already delivered, in which after the 10 years, usually the asset will be depleted and also obsolete, and they have to do the kind of the upgrading. So by having a robust business model, it means they can do that. Secondly, from the perspective of the micro IPP is simple, but it's doable and replicable. Particularly if we can do the kind of the auction, we try to also elaborate the auction. And from the engagement with the local government, local government-owned enterprise, this is a kind of the provide a strong ground that the local government will commit to develop the off-grid as well. I think there's a concept on that, but I do believe that the private sector is very wide open and then interest to do this, particularly using the ESG modality. Thank you.
Mhm. Thanks, Bagus. I'm really quite interested in where the models that Anna is talking about and Bagus is talking about come down and meet the model that perhaps Charlie and even Mark have been working on. Perhaps Bagus, while I have you here, what's the sort of minimum scale perhaps that the models you're talking about would work at?
Okay, from the business model number one, the minimum is only 75 kilowatt, and then we try to elaborate because the problem is about as also mentioned by Michael, is about how the willingness to pay, because we need to treat the community itself. There is no freelance. If there is freelance, there is no sustainability. So that's the main concept. And then the biggest one is at this moment we try to assess this problem about 1.2 megawatt. So using the combined hydro and the PV. But it is very fascinating to understand about the community. But combining with the local institution like a utility company, it is also develop the capability of the utility company to develop the off-grid, because they always think that, oh, this is marginal area, I don't have to cover that. Because if we put, maybe Michael and John can elaborate more. If we, shall we say, we provide electricity to the community with a minimum level, within 1 year or 2 years, they will build or they will buy the rice cooker, they will buy the refrigerator. The demand is going to be spiking. It means the demand will grow basically while we develop the supply. Some kind like that. So that's why the business model number one is quite applicable. But whenever we develop the business model, please, it is not only technical. We need to have a kind of the overall concept, like how to deliver the strategy, how to deliver the maintenance and everything. Yeah.
Thanks, Bagus. Anna, what kind of minimum scale, if any, does your auction system sort of go down to?
Well, if we go into the off-grid applications, although I really didn't speak to that in the presentation, I know that there is this scaling mini-grid program launched by the World Bank and the IFC in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And they're looking into supporting the country develop this procurement approach, this sort of competitive approach to selecting the mini-grid provider. If we go into the on-grid applications, which is where I'm mostly working, I think in there, typically the project sizes, the minimum project sizes that are defined are rather big for non-utility scale, so rather 500 kilowatts of installed capacity. And the reason is that it is also very tricky to make smaller scale plants compete with larger scale plants, because the development process and the economics are not the same. Solar PV is a modular technology, sure, but still there are important differences. I will say that still there is a possibility to, for example, do an auction with a total volume that is not too large, that is also really defined for the country needs. For example, I believe in Senegal, their first auction, they were targeting a capacity between, in total, of 40 to 60 megawatts. And that is definitely a different size than, for example, what is auctioned in South Africa or in bigger countries like India. So, yeah, I think it's an approach that can work also with smaller volumes. I think in terms of scale of the projects, yeah, what we observe is this 500 kilowatt installed capacity number.
Great, thanks for that explanation, Anna. Mark, I'm very interested to know, just where people go to after you've given them a taste of, lighting in their homes. Are you seeing a sort of a pickup in the interest and understanding of the range of different aspects energy can bring to people's lives, and seeing them sort of strive to, do more and gain more access to energy?
Yeah, actually, in our approach right now, we're still on the phase one, wherein it's household electrification. But our long-term goal is to also establish what we call solar hubs. These are facilities that are powered by solar that could help them generate more in their livelihood, so that they would have the capacity to avail higher services of energy. So we still have no working model of it yet, but we're seeing successful models in other groups as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, it must be such a transition in people's lives. But once they have a little bit, the next thought is, what can I do next? So I think you've got a ever-growing challenge ahead of you in keeping up with that demand that you'll see there. Charlie, I was just wanting to, I'd sort of noticed some of the questions that are starting to come in. There's a lot of interest in your model. People saying, will it fit this situation? Will it fit that situation? From what you were saying, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the role of the utility in sustainability becomes quite important, along with having the community who's obviously bought into it. And
Okay.
organisers, you've got your mic on.
Thank you.
Michelle?
Meron pa?
Diyan na lang, puro diyan.
Thanks. Sorry for that interruption, Charlie and audience.
Okay.
What I was asking about is the role of the utilities, how you go about getting them involved. There seems to be people who want to pick up your model and run with it, or get you to run with it for them. How do you get these utilities on board?
Emma, I'm now treading on a dangerous ground, but I have to share this, okay? And I agree with you. I'll use a case in the Philippines, okay? The island of Mindoro has 2 provinces. Right now, they are short of 30 megawatts of power. And then we were invited to share our thoughts on how to do that. And so we told them, you know what? I learned from my research that even if we put a 30 megawatt solar farm or wind farm in Mindoro, your 2 utilities there cannot absorb because your distribution system is weak. Okay? So, in other words, for the past, 3 years, they've been talking about the problem. And then I told them, you know what? We can reverse the whole thing. They said, what do you mean? Okay? In most of our discussion today, the assumption was we will always work with the existing structure of the utility, which is a one-way direction of power that is from large generation going to large transmission and then distribution, and then it goes to the households. But he said, current technology of distributed energy resources, you can reverse the whole process. The houses, instead of just being consumers of electricity, we can install 1, 2, or 3 kilowatts of power. Okay? And then we can feed all that power back to the grid. And so I call it a swarm strategy. So in other words, number one, if you reduce the total demand from the grid, okay, because the grid cannot absorb it, then it would stabilize. And the problem with solar farm is that you have concentration risk. If you put 30 megawatts in one place and suddenly it rains or it becomes cloudy, then you lose your 30 megawatts. But if you distribute your 30 megawatts in 30,000 houses throughout the island of Mindoro, it wouldn't rain at the same time in that island. So you have a much stable source of electricity. So that's the approach that what I'm saying. I'm telling the grid, you know what? Whether you join with me or not, these people, because they are not having power, will install their own solar PV system at home. Okay? So your only choice is whether you join with them, you support them or not. Because you cannot prevent them from doing that. And I am telling you, you will have a very, very good business case if you support them. Why? Because if you install net metering, the excess power from their homes, you can sell that to their neighbors and you have no systems loss. You know, these are the things. We have to educate, especially the very traditional thinking of the DUs. And I'm very happy that Bagos mentioned about the local government. You know, I was a mayor, and I think our problem is, if there is a water problem in the municipality, they go to the mayor to solve that. But if there is a power problem in the municipality, they go somewhere else. But I'm saying that look at the mandate of the local government unit. It is our mandate to provide the people with the basic utilities. You have to push the local government units to take the leadership in solving the problem. And I think their solution is actually renewable energy, because they can intervene and lease solar panels all over their utilities, just as they are leasing farm tractors. It's exactly the same concept, but you are just applying it into a new way. So my point, Emma, is we have to think differently. We have to think, and I think we have to think in terms of distributed energy resources anchored on renewable energy.
No, I'm very interested in your aptly named swarm strategy. I'm sure that will catch on. Name's catchy anyway. Look, there's sort of that gets us to the end of the panel discussion, but there's a whole raft of interesting questions coming in from the audience. So perhaps I'll switch tack and put out a few of those, and you can jump in and answer them if you're interested. There's a question on managing the increase in demand. Once people have had access to a certain amount of energy, they're looking to access more. I think, Charlie, you noted that your system had to be stepped up in demand. Perhaps you could start off on that, and others come in, particularly if you've got the private sector coming in. How do you get them to move quickly to meet the growing demand? But Charlie, start with you.
Yes, what we did was, actually we told the community, if we are going to invest here, it means that your power cost will be much higher compared to, we will assist you to get a grant. And we were able, fortunately, to get a grant for them. But if there is a next increase, I think the local utility already understands that it can be a profitable investment for them, because they can already blend their power source. So I think there's a solution there. This is a unique thing because this is an isolated island. But had they been part of a mainland, it would be much, much easier. But I think the business model can already show that they can expand the system profitably.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else want to come in with some thoughts on how systems can be expanded?
So if I may add,
yes, please.
Michael, sorry, it's about increasing. So as I mentioned earlier, once you provide the electricity to the community, then the demand will grow anyway. So because the behavior of the people is changed, people is always trying to have a better life. So what's next? So from my perspective, in our experience using this case study, so by having a collaboration with the utility company, it's also opened the opportunity to enhance and expand the capacity of the existing asset after the 5 years or after the 10 years. So it is fine to have a collaboration with the utility company, and then also build the knowledge of the utility company to deliver the specific, particularly the remote island, because it's a different story with the different knowledge from their existing diesel generation base. So combining hybrid now is an option, and we are also learning from our intervention to the program. We also enhance the existing asset into the hybrid modality using the combined PV, BESS, and also diesel generation. It is also doable as long as we also develop bit by bit for the knowledge development at the utility and also the community itself. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Bagus. Anyone else have any thoughts on this issue? No. Look, another question that's popped up in amongst the questions is thinking about how to procure solar panels and how it's done within these projects. In current situation of supply problems, etc., it's probably quite hard, I imagine, procuring things at the moment. But Mark, Charlie, even Bagus, from your experience, or Young-sung, your experience in Korea, is there sort of efficient ways that the technology needed in these projects can be procured?
Yeah, we have new technologies in investment. P2P way is just fine with us. Even though just a small amount of investment, but the citizens can invest via online platform. So like in Philippines, the citizen from Manila or Jakarta from Indonesia can invest on some remote areas. It will be good for investment, and the beneficial could be shared with the citizens and the local communities. I think so. Yeah, actually, I have a. Yeah, go ahead. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. In terms of procurement, it's normal that if you procure in bulk, it is much cheaper. Okay, so one of the ideas that we were thinking is to encourage multi-purpose cooperatives. The multi-purpose cooperatives, they exist everywhere. For the multi-purpose cooperatives to have a what we call a green energy program, meaning they have the money, they can procure all the components of the solar PV system. They can finance it to their own members. And by doing that, they can bring down the cost because their procurement will be in bulk. We now also have a partnership with a local bank, and we are testing it, a local commercial bank in the Philippines. We call it the REAP program. It is the Renewable Energy Employee Assistance Program. We are starting it with our company, and the bank is also testing it with their employees in Metro Manila. The idea is, if you have an employee, they could borrow from the bank to finance the installation of solar panels. And in partnership with our company, it is our responsibility to design, install, and operate in the next 25 years that solar installation. It is the bank that finances, because without that program, it's very difficult for an individual person to, let us say, buy a 1 kilowatt system or 1.5 and go to the bank and borrow. You cannot do that. So we are happy that this bank, we applied it for our company, for our own employees, and then they saw the potential of this, and we said, you know what, this is much better than financing a motorcycle. Because in a motorcycle, you can meet an accident, but this one, you just put it on the roof. Now, and then we said, you know what, 1 kilowatt will give you an average of maybe 4 kilowatt hours per day in the Philippines, maybe 120 kilowatt hours a month. If you price that at 10 pesos per kilowatt hour, if you buy that from the utility, then you have a potential savings of 1,200. That would be around a little over 14,000 in 12 months. Now, if that would cost you like 70,000 to buy a 1 kilowatt, your return of your investment is more than 16%. I said, where do you get that return? And that will stay on for the next 25 years. So I think there's a huge gap in the education, because we are so used to electricity as something we just apply from the utility and then we pay monthly. We are not thinking of it as a one-time investment which will give us huge returns in the next 25 years. And that is, I think, if we begin to inculcate that on the minds of our consumers, there will be more and more buy-in on renewable energy because they will not look at it just as a consumption of power, but rather it is an investment for cheap electricity over a very long term.
Yeah,
Actually-
absolutely. But finding the, breaking down the barriers so that people can afford that long-term investment is good. We're coming up to the end of our discussion period. Young-Sung, can I just turn to you and you can finish the point you're making earlier and perhaps just share any sort of key observation you have. I'll give everybody a minute or less to share that. Young-Sung, please start.
Yeah, actually, I have a question to the other panelists, but it's too late maybe. I want to know about how to persuade the community as the first time, but maybe next time we can share the stories. Yeah, I think the trust is the first step for every project. So we can collaborate at this region. We share this region, so maybe we can trust for the first time. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Young-Sung. And yeah, I think it would have been great to have a bit longer, but anyway, good things come in small packages. Mark, can we hear from you just any final thoughts you might want to share before we close off?
Yeah, I'm just enjoying listening to my fellow panelists answering the questions because I'm learning as well. So I'm hoping that I'll be also use that in the communities that we're working.
Thanks, Mark. Anna, anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a shift in an awareness to ensuring that, yes, there's access to cheap electricity, but also that there is some benefit sharing tied to it. And auctions have the potential to be adapted to ensure that the private sector is incentivized to provide these social benefits. I think there's definitely an important role for the government to not only set the rules of the game of those auctions, but even doing the accompanying work, the facilitation work in these communities that has to do with being better prepared in terms of how to evaluate these projects that come into their communities. What are potential risks? What are potential ways of ensuring that they get some benefits from it? Even a reliable electricity access. So in general, I would say that there is an increasing awareness and potential to gear these tools to ensuring that those two goals of cheap electricity access as well as benefit sharing are compatible.
Thanks for sharing that, Anna. Bagus, anything you'd like to share before we close out?
Thank you, Emma. So I think from learning from this audience, from the resource person as well, thank you very much. And we see that the change perspective is a must, not only from the government, but all the stakeholders, including the community. The government is still very prominent actors, and clear horizon and legal regulatory framework is a must to provide a landscape for the private sector and any party to jump into the off-grid, particularly for renewable energy. And private sector is very exciting to jump into the renewable energy, particularly to obtain their ESG, environment and sustainability and good governance, and by more off-grid to the marginal area to reach the community there. And collaboration is the keyword. So it's not only single part of I have a very interesting project, so what? So this collaboration is the key. I think that's it for me. Thank you, Emma.
Thanks. Yeah, very thoughtful words, Bagus. Charlie, something final from you.
Okay, two things. Don't worry if you feel that the adoption of renewable energy is quite slow, because that is normal in the theory of the adoption of new innovation. The 2% will immediately adopt it. It will be followed by the next 12%. And then all of a sudden that around 45% will follow. My sense is we are now working on that next 12% because more and more people, and with this discussion, it's no longer, renewable energy is no longer so esoteric and only for the activists. It's now going mainstream. So the moment that it becomes so mainstream that it becomes now the norm of society that you should have renewable energy, then boom. The second is this. We thought that renewable energy was only because we care for the environment. This is no longer the case. We want renewable energy, especially solar and wind, because the issue now is energy security. With what happened in Ukraine and Russia, we thought before that we have an unlimited supply of coal. We can just import oil. And all of a sudden, like our country in the Philippines, if there is a problem of coal and oil, then we will have in a very difficult situation. And our answer is, if you have wind and solar, once you put it in your rooftop, there's no need for any imported input because the sun will shine every day for the next so many millennium and you will have power for free. So thank you very much for this opportunity to be part of this forum.
Thank you, Charlie, Bagus, Mark, Anna, Youngsung, for joining us today. I've really enjoyed this discussion. I might cross a motorbike off the top of my bucket list and put some solar panels on instead. I'm nearly convinced to do that, but really enjoyed hearing from you all. I hope the audience has too. Thank you for your time. I'll hand over to my colleague Mukta to share some final words. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Once again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on from where you are connecting. Thank you very much for joining today's important session. And I appreciate the insights that the presenters and panel members shared with us. Of course, understanding of how the innovative technologies and effective business models could help improving electricity access and sustainable community development is of great importance. And we heard today very interesting and insightful ideas, views, and practical suggestions on that. Obviously, renewable energy has a great potential to transform the energy sector and ensure energy transition from fuel-based generation to clean energy generation and reducing dependency of fossil fuel in the process. And ADB and other development partners are focusing on helping developing member countries to develop clean energy, strengthen power systems, and what is essential, enable wider electricity access to clean energy for people. Expanding access to electricity to bring its benefits to the people and improve their livelihoods, which certainly can include health and education services, and small business opportunities and starting income generating activities is critical. This, of course, can be done through on-grid connection by expanding transmission and distribution networks and providing support to enable connections, particularly for the poor and vulnerable, but in many cases through off-grid systems based on renewable energy, whether it is solar, wind, or hybrid systems, especially in remote rural areas and isolated islands where there is no grid access. And achieving such last mile electrification in some countries is usually quite challenging. It was good to hear about successful community projects in the Philippines. It was great and very interesting to know about studies of 10 institutional off-grid business models, whether it's utility, community, commercially based, or with local government involvement in Indonesia, including various issues of design, asset management, tariff collection, etc. And it was really good to learn about renewable energy auctions that could transition benefits to local communities. As it was mentioned, the crucial issue is how we can ensure sustainability of such off-grid systems, their proper operation and management, and involvement of communities in these, including relevant training and routine maintenance in a sustainable manner. We heard many interesting ideas and case studies on how use of innovative technologies and business models can help sustainability of electricity access projects and community involvement and inclusion. I believe this exchange of ideas and experiences was very useful and could help replicate these in other places for the benefit of communities and people. I would like to thank all of you for active participation in this session and sharing your views. Thank you very much. Over to you, Emma.
With that, we wrap up. Thank you everyone for this afternoon.